Hello everyone, welcome to Property Experts where we provide you information related to property in a sensible manner. Hence, before purchasing property worth lakhs and crores of rupees, please do watch our videos to never fall in any sort of a scam or a fraud. In today's video, it is a quick guide for property buyers purchasing from an NRI property. Purchase in general is a bit perplexing considering the documentation and paperwork involved, especially if the seller is an NRI. Hence, follow some of the expert suggested tips. Purchasing a property from an NRI to have a hassle free experience. Whether the property is being purchased from a residential Indian or an NRI banker is a must, so keep in mind both buyer and seller should have a bank card to carry out the transaction. If the seller is more than one in number, which is in the case of joint sellers, then both NRI sellers should have PAN cards separately. And the same applies to joint buyers. A buyer must have a tax deduction and collection account number, which is a TAN for TDS reduction and payment and is a must. Though it is not mandatory for NRI seller to have a TAN, if the buyer does not have a TAN number, then the buyer is advised to apply for a TAN number along with the joint. While if there are any of the case, if the property has multiple owners associated, that buyer should ensure that all owners are on board and agree upon selling the property. Also, a buyer should ensure that the payment is done in equal proportions to all the sellers in order to stay away from any legal risk later. In case of NRI seller fails to be physically present in India and complete the transaction process, then the NRI has to designate a special power of attorney to a relative or a non-reliable person to carry out the transaction on behalf of the NRI. Also, the special power of attorney should specify property details and complete self-details. For an NRI property, the payment should be only made to the NRI seller in his voice or her bank account. The SPO, which is the special power of attorney holder, may compel the buyer to deposit funds to his or her own account instead of an RS account. But bear in mind, the POA holders is just a representative of the NRI for the transaction execution, and the statements of fund transfer to the NRA's account would be handy to the future and stay away from any legal hassles. NRI sailors from Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka must have an approval from the Central Bank of India to sell their property. So it is always advised to check for the same before a property purchase from an NRI. So the crux of the matter is TDS on the property that our buyer purchases according to Section 195 of the income tax. The buyer is responsible to deduct TDS at the time of payment to the NRI seller. In case of payments being done in the form of installments, TDS should be deducted as and when installment is paid, the rate in which TDS has to be deducted on property purchase from an NRI is different to that of a purchase from a resident Indian. TDS is applicable at a rate of 20.80% for properties costing less than rupees 50 lakh, 22.88% for properties priced between 50 lakh and 1 crore, and 23.9% for properties costing more than rupees 1 crore. Importantly, the TDS percentage is calculated on the capital gains earned by the NRI according to Section 195 of the Income Tax Act. Having a tax or the tax must after the buyer deducts the TDS amount in order to deposit with the government. To know more about the paying ideas on property purchase, watch our related video by clicking on the link in the description box below. TDS must be deposited on or before the 7th of the month immediately. Succeed in the month of the deduction and buyer should pay TDS from self account. Also, it is of utmost importance to note here that the buyer should also file for TDS returns by submitting Form 27Q after filling Lydia's return. The buyer should issue Form 16A to NRI, which certifies the amount of TDS paid to the government. It is advised to the buyer to be cautious and follow all the steps and stay away from any upcoming legal issues. That brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have learned a lot about in this video. Do watch all our stuff so that you have no doubts regarding property. Thank you.